Hello and welcome back to Round the Table, the slow TV radio podcast from the meeting point for students of English not only in Bilbao but throughout the world. And in a packed programme today we are discussing the topic of pets. So without further ado, let's look at some of the phrases from this week's conversations. The first phrase that came up was at the top of your voice. That means when you shout as loud as possible. So when the dog ran away, he shouted at the top of his voice. To stray from the path. Stray is to take a wrong turning and to get lost. So the reason stray came up in the conversation is because when there is a dog that is walking around in the streets and he appears to have no home. He's not quite a homeless dog, but he's escaped from the house and he doesn't know the way home. That is a stray dog. They also use it metaphorically for people that stray from the path and they do some bad things and they don't behave correctly. So stray is to leave the normal path or to get lost. The novelty wears off. We were using this when discussing how sometimes people get a dog for Christmas. And to begin with, it's all very exciting. You've got a new pet and you take it for walks every day. But sometimes you come home from work and it's raining and you don't really feel like going out. And then we can say that the novelty wears off. We get bored with our toys, don't we? And we want new toys. This next one is to revolve around. Her life revolves around her dog. This means the dog is the centre of her world. Her life revolves around her dog. You might say your life revolves around your job, or your life revolves around your family. I have my doubts. This means I am not convinced. Okay, it's not the same as when you have a question. If you're ever in class and you have a question about the grammar, say, I have a question. Don't say, I have a doubt. Nobody in England says, I have a doubt. Say, I have a question. But this phrase, I have my doubts, it means I am not convinced. For example, some people say that there are not dangerous dogs. There are only irresponsible owners. But I say, I have my doubts. I think there are dangerous dogs. The next one, I have a fear of. I have a fear of dogs. I have a fear of flying. This means I am afraid of, which is another way of saying the same thing. The strange thing here is it's a fear. It's in the singular, and people seem to think this is a strange thing to say, but that's the way it is. I have a fear of dogs. The next one is the word leash. We also use the word lead. In fact, in England, I think the word lead is more common than leash. Leash may be more American. But we do say to be off the leash when the dog is running in the park and it's not under control. It is off the leash. And we can also use to unleash, meaning to release. And it can also be quite metaphorical, like in warfare, for example. They can unleash a missile attack on innocent school children. Let's not get political. So unleash an attack as well as unleash a dog. The last one here is a strange one. In the doghouse. This is when you have done something wrong and your partner is very angry with you and probably will not speak to you. The phrase is to be in the doghouse. It might be a bit sexist, but I think it's a man that's in the doghouse because he's forgotten his wife's birthday an anniversary or something like that. But I picture a man being in the doghouse. Maybe that's just the way it's always represented in films and cartoons, but that's the way it is. The other strange thing about it is we don't really have a doghouse. A doghouse is called a kennel. The little box where the dog lives, if you imagine Snoopy, that cartoon, he lives in a kennel, that little house. There is also the kennels in plural, which is like a hotel for dogs. When you go on holiday and you have to leave your dog somewhere, that's called the kennels. There's also the dog's home, where the stray dogs go. All the unwanted dogs go to the dog's home. And in America you hear the dog pound, which is sort of like a prison for dogs, really, where the stray dogs go to the dog pound. So the dog house is only used in this expression to be in the dog house, which is rather strange. Let's move on to some quite interesting facts. Goldfish. People were discussing goldfish this week and the fact that they only live a few days or a few weeks. No, they don't, I said. No, that if they're looked after properly, they can last a long time. The record for the oldest goldfish is 43 years. His name was Tish. His brother, Tosh, died after 19 years, but Tish survived for 43 years. And here's an interesting thing, that if you look at the scales of a fish, the scales are those little plates that cover the skin of a fish. If you look at the scales under a microscope, they are made of concentric rings, in the same way as when you cut a tree and you can count the rings to see how old they are. You can do the same with fish, but only if the fish lives outdoors. Obviously, in the case of Tish, he lived indoors, so those rings don't happen in the same way. But you can tell the age of a fish by counting the rings on the scales. Here's the next interesting question. Which country has the most tigers? You're thinking India. Well, you're wrong. The answer is the United States of America. And until recently, the answer was Texas. Yes, they did have more tigers in Texas than in India, but apparently the figures have changed. In United States, they have between 5,000 and 10,000. It's a little bit vague. There was a survey not long ago where they reckoned there were about 10,000 tigers in the United States. But now they think it might only be 5,000 because they've introduced some laws, and the law about keeping dangerous animals like tigers was only introduced in 2022. Why did they take so long to think of having a law about owning a tiger? But apparently there are significantly fewer tigers these days, only about 5,000 probably, but there's only 4,000 in India. So there you go, there are more tigers in the United States than in India. The next interesting fact, talking about breeds of dogs. Breeds of dogs are different types of dogs. There is an extinct one called a turnspit dog that lived in England. I don't know if it lived in other countries. A turnspit dog. A spit is like a metal bar that goes in front of a fire and you put meat on it. And it turns in front of the fire for roasting the meat. Okay? Now, you can turn the bar by hand and rotate the meat so it cooks evenly. Or somebody invented a mechanism with a wheel and a chain, and they put the little dog in the wheel, and as it walked, the meat rotated in front of the fire. And they had a special breed of dog just for this purpose, and it was called a turnspit dog. Next interesting fact about pets is Lord Byron, who was a British aristocrat and poet, I believe he was. He went to Cambridge University in 1805, and apparently there's a rule that says you're not allowed to have a pet dog if you're living in Trinity College, Cambridge. No dogs allowed. So he got himself a pet bear. Yes, a bear, I said. Not bird, not boar, not beer, but a pet bear, which he used to walk around in the grounds of the university. Just because they told him he's not allowed to have a dog, he decided to have a bear. These aristocratic people are allowed to do these crazy things. There's another aristocrat story of Walter Rothschild, the Rothschild banking family, the second Baron Rothschild. He liked animals, and he had a carriage pulled by zebras. Yes, he had 4 tame zebras, and he used to drive his carriage around London pulled by zebras. And you can find a photo on the internet if you Google carriage pulled by zebras. That man will be the second Baron Rothschild. And there's an even stranger picture of him riding on a giant tortoise, if you want to find that. So these aristocratic people are a bit crazy, aren't they? If anyone else did it, they'd be locked away, I think. But aristocrats are allowed to be eccentric. One more eccentric person is the French artist Gérard de Nerval, who in the 1840s in Paris walks around with his pet lobster. Yes, he had a pet lobster, but he did actually go completely mad and he was locked up. So there you go. Not everyone can be eccentric and get away with it. So those are some amazing stories, or should I say, not amazing, but quite interesting. Just a very quick little what's the difference for today. We've got these 4 pairs of words. The first one, wild and savage. Don't confuse wild and savage. Wild is an animal that lives free, which is undomesticated. Savage is much more violent and dangerous. So, a wild animal. A small bird can be wild. A butterfly can be wild, but they're not savage. Maybe a wolf or a tiger might be savage, or even some savage dogs. And a domesticated dog could still be savage. So the wild dogs and savage dogs are not necessarily the same. Savage can also be descriptive of an attack when there's lots of blood. You can have a savage attack. Jail and cage. Quite a simple difference here. Jails are for people, bad people, and cages are for animals. So what about a bird cage and an aviary? Well, it's much the same as a fish tank and an aquarium, really. Depends how big and complex it is. If you have a bird in your house, you've probably got a bird cage. If you've got a very big cage that you could actually walk into with a dozen or more birds, that might be an aviary. They're much bigger and more elaborate. The same with aquariums and fish tanks. The fish tank is much smaller. An aquarium is going to be bigger with more fish and heating systems and filtration systems and that kind of thing. So basically, if you're looking at Germanic compound words, they're probably smaller and cheaper, whereas the more Latin-looking word is going to be the bigger, more complex one, as usual in English. So that's just a quick what's the difference? Let's have a look at a quick bit of pronunciation. Right, we have here bite, bit, bitten. Bite. Now, the difference between bite and bit. Listen to the letter I. Bite, bit. The letter I in the first word sounds like the name I. The letter I sounds like I, because that E is changing the sound of the I. So bite sounds like that, but bit, you see that I sounds I, not I. Bite, bit. Now the past participle there is bitten, and we want the I to sound the same as bit. So we have to put two T's. That is why there are two T's in bitten. Have you ever been bitten by a dog? The dog might bite you. Yesterday the dog bit me. And I have never been bitten. So those two T's are there to maintain the same pronunciation on the I as in bit. The same happens with hide, hid, hidden. You see that is following exactly the same pattern. Hide, that I is not the same as the I in hid. Hide, hid, hidden. And a similar thing in ride, rode, ridden. I like to ride my horse. Yesterday I rode my horse. Have you ever ridden a horse? And yes, we were discussing horse riding this week as well. And now we have a new feature. Coming up shortly is our celebrity guest speaker. But first, we have to look at this. The word stroke. Stroke is what you do with your hand when you put your hand and move it across the top of a cat. Yes, how you are affectionate with a cat. You might caress the fur of your cat. That is to stroke. You stroke the cat, you stroke the dog. The next word is trigger. Trigger is the little lever that you pull when you're firing a gun. That thing that you use with your finger is a trigger. And in this context, it is to start something happening, usually a chain of actions. You trigger something to make something happen. Pamper is a word that we might have looked at before. Last week we had the word mollycoddle for children. You can also use pamper in a similar way. It's to treat something in a very nice way, sometimes excessively. So if you have a dog which sits on a little cushion and eats little delicacies and probably sleeps in your bed, that dog is pampered. A dog is supposed to be outside in the garden. You can also pamper yourself if you do special things for yourself, like go and get your nails painted. If you like that kind of thing, you can pamper yourself, buy yourself special things. Stroller is another word for the vehicle that you use for moving babies around. Okay, if you understand that description. The pushchair. It has several names. You have prams, pushchairs, buggies, and strollers as well. Some people call it a stroller. You can also get them for pets. Baffling means confusing. Something that it is impossible for you to understand is baffling. A breed is a type of dog. It's also to reproduce animals, to multiply animals. Dogs breed, and you can have a breed of dogs, like a Dalmatian or a Yorkshire Terrier. Those are different breeds. Herd is a group of animals, usually cows. If you've got 20 cows, that is a herd of cows. And it can also be the verb to move animals. Sometimes you use dogs for herding. Livestock. Stock are usually the things you're going to sell in a shop. Livestock are all the animals on a farm. Struggle, we looked at last week. Things that are very difficult to do. You struggle to do them. It can be a fighting verb, but usually it's something that's very difficult. Like I struggle to understand when I'm watching a film in English. And finally, snout is the nose of an animal. The snout. They do have other names as well, but snout is a common word for the nose of an animal. So now let's have our good friend, celebrity guest speaker.
In much of the Western world, pets are often treated as full members of the family. Dogs, cats, and other animals share our homes, our routines, and sometimes even our beds. For many people, especially those who live alone, pets provide an important source of comfort and companionship. A dog, in particular, can give structure to a person's day. Regular walks create routine and encourage exercise, and dog owners often find themselves chatting with other people in the park or on the street. In this way, pets can even help reduce social isolation. There is also a physiological reason why people feel good around animals. Studies suggest that stroking a pet can trigger the release of chemicals such as serotonin and oxytocin in the brain, both of which are associated with feelings of calm and well-being. This partly explains why animals are sometimes used in therapy settings. Therapy dogs, for example, visit hospitals, schools, and care homes where their presence can reduce anxiety and provide emotional comfort to patients, children, and elderly residents. However, the modern relationship between humans and pets can also appear excessive. In some cases, animals are pampered to an almost absurd degree. Dogs may wear jackets, designer collars, or even be pushed around in specially designed pet strollers. To someone visiting from a poor or developing country, this level of indulgence might seem baffling. After all, many of these animals were originally bred for practical tasks such as guarding property, herding livestock, or assisting hunters in the field. This contrast raises questions about the suitability of modern pet ownership. Many dogs that were bred to run across fields or work alongside farmers now spend most of their lives confined to small urban apartments. Although owners may love their pets dearly, keeping an energetic working animal in such restricted conditions can be seen as unfair. A dog designed for movement and activity may struggle when its world is limited to a short walk and a living room. Another concern involves the breeding of pedigree dogs. In the pursuit of particular physical features, some breeds have been exaggerated to the point where they suffer from serious health problems. Dogs with extremely short snouts may struggle to breathe properly, while others experience joint problems that make walking painful. These animals sometimes appear as unfortunate caricatures of what their breed once was. Certain breeds also raise questions about safety. Some dogs have been selectively bred for strength, aggression, or fighting ability, and their presence in ordinary households can be controversial. Critics argue that such breeds are unnecessary in modern society, and that they pose risks to other animals and to people, particularly children. Finally, pet ownership also carries economic and environmental costs. Feeding, veterinary care, and other expenses can easily amount to more than €1,000 per year for a single dog. At the same time, pets consume resources and contribute to environmental impact through food production and waste. For some observers, it seems difficult to justify such spending and consumption in a world where many people still struggle to meet their basic needs.
And now it's time for a thought for the day. Diamonds are a girl's best friend, they say. They also say, a man's best friend is his dog. I shall add no further comment, but that's something for you to think about this week. I was going to add some stories about some pets that I have owned in the past, but I started recording it and I got to an hour and a half of pet stories. So I've decided to put it out as another video. I'll put a link to it at the end of this video, but it will probably go out on Sunday at the same time. So if you want to listen to 1.5 hours of me rambling about various pets that I've owned in the past, that might be an interesting listening exercise for you. There will be a bit of vocabulary in there as well. And I'll leave you with a bit of footage here of a very intelligent cow who's learnt to operate a drinking fountain. Have a good week. Till next week.
Qué listas son las vacas de Bilbao.